So we're going to get started. So thank you everyone for being here today for our income tax info session around specifically work from home legislation. We'll start with a land acknowledgement as we do at the beginning of all of our events. So Toronto's in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. So that is a land acknowledgement that we use if folks are joining us from Takarano, but if you are joining us from anywhere around the globe, specifically on Turtle Island, we do encourage you to check out the website native-land.ca, and you can find out more information about what land acknowledgements are, what they mean, and what lands you might be inhabiting, and the relationship with the Indigenous people that still exist on that land. And have a relationship there. So we do encourage folks to check that out. We'll post that in the comments and the chats, and let's all be very mindful of that. I'm going to be introducing Bill and then passing it over to him. So Bill Reid holds both a law degree and MBA. He has been practicing law for over 30 years and counseling students for over 25 years at Ryerson and other schools. In addition to the services mentioned on our website, he is also available to explain legal procedures and documents to students who may be represented by another lawyer. So thank you, Bill, for joining us. I'll pass it over to you.
Okay, yes, so that is who I am, and I look pretty much the same way I do in that picture, just plain a background. But it's true, yes, so I am employed by CESAR and available to all of its members for individual legal advice and assistance. And that covers really any area of law. We mentioned a few here: family law, immigration. They're two of the ones I'm most often consulted about, also tenancy situations, criminal law as well, and any kind of business matter. So, but anything really that anyone wants to talk about of a legal nature. And if someone doesn't know if their problem is really a legal problem or not, they're still welcome to contact me. I'm never going to say, oh, that's not a legal problem, get out of here. If you don't know who else to talk to me. And if I am not the best person to help, I'll help you to find who is. Always happy to do that as well. And we can move on to the next slide. So yes, there are reasons why a student would file a tax return. Students sometimes think if they don't have an income, for example, that they can't or have no reason to file an income tax return. But the reality is that there are reasons why they should. And one of those reasons is because many times students are entitled to a tax refund. There are certain refunds that are available to everyone, even those with little or no actual employment income. There's also certainly the tuition fee credit, and this is very important because students are allowed to deduct a certain portion of their tuition fees and related expenses. And if they really don't have an income or much income in the year that they paid those fees, they can carry that credit forward to future years. And many students graduate and are then able to claim tuition fees from past years, at least the amount that constitutes the credit. And in later years when they actually do have an income, but they need to have filed their income taxes in the years when they paid that tuition. So again, like the simplest case, you have really no income, but or minimal income, but if you do pay tuition fees, then file the taxes, receive the credit, carry it forward to future years when you do have an income. I mentioned about certain credits, the HST credit and some provincial credits There's a climate action incentive. Those are all credits that people that anyone can claim, and they're the reasons, especially people of lower incomes can claim those. And so that's definitely the reason why students should file their income tax, even if they don't have an income and don't end up owing tax. Still file your income tax. It'll benefit you. And we can move on. Many students, what we're going to talk about may not apply to. It isn't like it applies to every student, but many students it will apply to as well, especially CESAR members, because like the nature of the programs that CESAR members are in is such that many of them are employed. I would say a higher proportion in my experience than in regular full-time programs. So what we're going to talk about really does apply to people who are employed and who are working from home and did not work from home prior to the pandemic and the shutdown, but are doing so now because of those things. And so, as I mentioned here, even before the COVID-19 pandemic and shutdown, the Canada Revenue Agency did allow employees who worked from home to deduct a portion of their home office expenses. But that was, I'll say back when, it was like a year ago now, but it was back when there was no pandemic or shutdown, and most people who were employed worked at their workplaces. It was only a minority who worked from home, but because there were always some who worked from home, yes, the government allowed them to deduct a certain proportion of their home expenses. And the difference now for 2020 is that because of the pandemic and shutdown, a lot of people who did not work from home prior to it are now doing so. I'm one, and other people who work for CESAR and many other people employed in various contexts. So, and like I say, if people are not employed at all, then this won't pertain to them at this time. If they are employed but they've had to attend their workplaces, or if they have been laid off and receiving the government's benefits, then those in those situations they're receiving an income and not working from home. But people who are employed and have worked from home in 2020, there are a lot more of us, and I believe CESAR members as well, who are working from home and need to know what we're going to be talking about. Because the CRA, the Canada Revenue Agency, has introduced a simplified system this year, and employees who have worked from home may use either the simplified system or the more detailed system that existed in past years. And we can move on and talk about the differences and who should use what. So under the new simplified system, if an employee did not previously work from home, but did work from home in 2020 because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and if they worked from home for at least 2 consecutive weeks during 2020, and assuming that their employer didn't cover the expenses they incurred at home, then they may claim a deduction of $2 per day worked at home to a maximum of $400. So again, first thing is having worked from home only because of the pandemic and shutdown. So that's the first requirement. Then to have worked from home for at least 2 consecutive weeks. Well, 2 consecutive weeks of work is normally 10 days. You have to have done at least that much. If you work, for example, that minimum number, 10 days, you may deduct $2 a day, but that would be $20. So but you have to have worked at least those 2 consecutive weeks from home. When you have a record of how many days you have worked from home, and most of us do. I do. For most of us, it's not difficult to go back and calculate. If you can add up to 200 days, well, that will take you to a maximum deduction of $400. So have a record of how many days you worked from home. You have to have done so for at least 2 consecutive weeks, but that, or however many more days you can show you worked from home, up to a maximum of 200, multiply by 2, and that's the number of dollars that you can claim for the deduction. Having said all of that, again, that's assuming that the employer did not reimburse you for the expenses you incurred working from home. If the employer did, then you can't claim the deduction. And we can move on. So there are, again, the previous system still exists. Like I say, this is the new simplified regime for those who meet the qualifications I just discussed in the previous slide. If an employee worked from home, but not because of COVID-19, which would be most of the people who previously worked from home for other reasons before the pandemic, well, then they must use the detailed method, which I'll talk about more in a moment, the detailed method to calculate their claim. Likewise, if an employee, even if they did work from home because of the pandemic and shutdown, if they want to claim any additional expenses besides just what we call the home office at $2 per day, for example, if they want to deduct vehicle expenses, parking, tools, then they also must use the detailed method in order to do that. All you'll get from the simplified method is the $2 a day for the home office. And likewise, if an individual is self-employed, even if working from home, and even if they're only doing so now because of the pandemic, there is still a different set of forms for people who are self-employed. That's a slightly more complicated situation, which I can discuss with any individual who's in that situation. But today we're trying to make it simple for the majority of people who are working from home due to COVID-19 and claiming only the home office, and we can move on. So under the simplified system, an employee has to complete, there's a form. It's T777S. But it's not difficult to find that. If anybody Google searches Canada Revenue Agency form and that number, it'll come right up. It's not really a complicated form. It's mainly identifying information. And then option 1, and all they got to do is do the calculation based on the number of days, and then follow the instructions, which will include filing a copy of that form along with the other income tax forms. The detailed system requires that the employee complete that same form, but also requires a form from their employer. It's T2200S. Again, easily found, but so this, if someone wants to use the detailed system, they still use the T777S, get their employer to sign the T2200S. But if they're using the simplified, they just need to do the T777S. They do not need their employer to sign anything. So here I was saying before, I would discuss the detailed system a bit more. And if someone is using the detailed system, then to calculate the amount of the claim, they must calculate their permitted expenses. And there are a few things that the Canada Revenue Agency lists expenses that can be claimed, things such as utilities, and then the percentage of their residence that they use as a home office. So they need to calculate the square footage of their entire home, be it large or small or in between, and a reasonable amount of that space that they genuinely use as the home office, and calculate what percentage that home office is of the entire home. And they may claim that percentage of their total permitted expenses. So again, this is the system that's always been in place for people who worked from home because there was only a small minority of people. But under the present unique situations, the government knew it had to make things simpler for people who are working from home for the first time and only during the pandemic and only using a part of their home for it. And that's why the detailed system still exists, but the simplified system exists now for those of us who are working from home for the first time and want to keep it simple, and we can move forward. So yeah, that is what I have to say about that. Now, here is my email address, and this goes only to me confidentially, legal@mycesar.ca. And there are other resources we have on the CESAR website, a few short legal briefs that I've written. People may want to consult just to learn a few things about a few simple legal matters. And those resources can be found at the link that's indicated there. So the email address, however, like I say, goes only to me, and I'm in touch with email every day of the week. And if someone wants to discuss their own individual situation about the legal matters we've talked about today or any others, by all means, email me, and we will be happy. I'll be happy to have that discussion. Now, I believe we may have questions. And Corey, do you want to kind of vet that?
Yeah, so I think maybe what we'll do first is, because we just have 2 slides where we'll explain some of the
Sure.
tax services, and then we'll jump into the questions just in case any of the questions get into what Alyssa Williams will be presenting. So Alyssa, if you want to go next, and then we're starting to see the questions, please keep listing them and we'll start getting to them.
Awesome. Thanks, Corey, and thank you, Bill, for that very informative slide, the presentation. So I'm just going to talk about the CRA free virtual tax clinics. So Canada Revenue Agency has a program. It's called the Community Volunteer Income Tax Program. And before I get into it, I just want to let folks know that my name is Alyssa. I'm the service coordinator at CESAR. So I am staff at CESAR, and it's my role to coordinate the free tax clinic, which we typically do in person. But because of the pandemic, we weren't able to offer this in-person service because the offices are closed. And so typically we would recruit student volunteers. So students that are our members, certificate, part-time degree, chunk school students will have the opportunity to have their taxes done in person at our offices for free. And so, as I mentioned, because of the pandemic, our office space is closed, so we don't have the resources to provide. Typically, we would provide computers for that to be done, USB keys. There would be a lot of security measures in place for this service to run safely for the students that need it. So unfortunately, we have not been providing the service because of concerns around security. So one of the big important issues for us was we wanted to know who the volunteers were, and this wasn't possible for us with a virtual clinic. So this was one of the reasons why we didn't want to proceed with it. The volunteers that do run the clinics, we typically get their resumes and we're able to approve or say who we would want to have volunteering on behalf of the organization CESAR. But with the virtual clinics, all of that is done by the CRA, which is a different organization to us. And so that was one of the major reasons, because volunteers are just working from home with their internet, their computer, or their phones. But our members can still access the virtual clinic, so their video appointment. I can tell you a bit about what the virtual clinics look like based on the information that I received from Canada Revenue Agency when we were investigating whether we should host a virtual clinic. So the virtual clinics are led by phone appointment or video. So you must be identified by video call and government issued photo ID for the faster service. If you don't want to do a video, it takes a few weeks. You have to send in your ID. So the process is not as simple. So you do need to, present your SIN number, your social insurance security number, which is also one of the reasons why we were hesitant about providing the service, because that type of information, if we can't guarantee the security of that, we didn't want to sort of jeopardize our membership. But we do recognize that Canada Revenue Agency is providing this service, and we very much encourage folks that need to access this free, awesome service to use it, because the CRA has their own rules within that, and they can monitor, and we think it's best that it be left to them to sort of manage the ongoings of that. So you can definitely get a free appointment with, to file your taxes. And so that program is still running. So we definitely encourage members to use it if you need it. But there are some eligibility requirements that I wanted folks to know about. So you do need to have a modest income or no income. And it has to be a very simple tax situation. So you can't have interest income that's more than $1,000 for the tax year. So if you have investment income and your income is your single income is more than $35,000 a year, you will not be eligible to use one of these free clinics. So that's something to also take note of. So if you have your income is coming from pension or student loans or scholarships or what have you, you would have no problem using this clinic. And typically our clinics are used by students, but obviously if you're not enrolled in courses, like you can certainly still use the free CRA clinics. And so you can see the link on the presentation there. It's canada.ca /taxes -help. So that is a website. You can visit that website. You can actually search for a clinic that's in your area. So if you may have like a church or an association, or you might be part of a club that's in your community, you can actually see if they are offering it. So you'd be able to go with something that's nearby if you feel that it's safer for you. You want something that's in Ontario as well, if that's where you're situated. The clinics are across Canada, so it doesn't matter where you are, and also they're virtual, so the location is not going to matter as much in this case. Yeah, it's something for folks to think about, but we definitely encourage members that needed to use it, but also keeping in mind that this is unprecedented times, and we weren't able to sort of provide this service virtually before for security reasons, and obviously it's new territory. So just if you are using the clinics, just ensure that you're doing everything that you're comfortable with, and be aware of what information you're giving out during the appointment, and ask questions about how it's going to be secured, because the volunteers are supposed to destroy your information within 24 hours of the appointment. So these are just some important tips for folks to keep in mind if you are going to be using a virtual clinic. But this program, the CRA offering, is amazing, and we've participated in it for the last 6 years or so. I think last year was the only year that we haven't done it since I've been with CESAR. So yeah, we just wanted to support folks that want to use it, and there's help over the phone as well with Canada Revenue Agency. So there is a helpline that you can call if you have questions about it. So we encourage folks to use that, and I think for the next slide, I think we're going to talk a bit about how you can get your taxes done at home for free. So the awesome thing about being a member of CESAR is that you have access to bulk savings, or with our membership in the Canadian Federation of Students, we're able to offer a discount. Well, it's not a discount, it's free to everyone that's a member of our organization, because we're members of the Canadian Federation of Students. And so the code, that's why the code is CFS 1981. And so if you're familiar with UFile software, it's a very popular software. It's actually the software that we would use at the clinic. The CRA would provide us with, it usually costs money. When we do the clinic with Canada Revenue Agency, we are provided with free access. And so that isn't a usual situation. You would have to pay for the service. And so as a service to our members that aren't eligible for the free tax clinic, we do have this code that you can do it at home. So if you are self-employed, you're not eligible for the free tax clinic. So this would be the service for you. You would definitely want to utilize this code because you can get your taxes done for free. Especially, we know a lot of our members being students, a lot of folks might be working. That situation may have changed, with the situation of the pandemic. And so we know that accessing services, tax filing services doesn't look the same for everyone. So, you would be getting a refund, or you may or may not be getting a refund, whatever the situation is. We want to minimize the amount of money that you would even have to pay to access the money that is already owed to you, if there's money owed to you by the government from your tax filing. So for us, we definitely believe in providing free services because it's important that it is accessible regardless of your situation. So, just wanted to speak to the importance of why it's free. And yeah, you don't need to, be currently enrolled in courses. This is just, you have the code, you have access to it, so you're able to use it. You may have been enrolled. We have a lot of members that take courses maybe in one term, but the following term they're not enrolled. It doesn't matter, as long as you're part of the organization, you're able to use this code. It's not going to ask you for any personal information. It's not going to ask you to verify that you are a CESAR member. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. And I'm seeing some questions. I'm not sure, as Corey mentioned, we'll address it at the end. So I'll hold off unless you would like me to answer that right now.
Okay, so thank you for that, Alyssa. Yeah, so we have some great questions here. I think while we're on UFAL, and I see one question here, let's address that one, and then we're going to jump back into some of the content that Bill was covering. But if other folks have questions about the CRA tax clinics or UFAL, Alyssa will stay on the call. Okay, so I'm actually seeing a lot of questions, so let's actually just go right to the beginning. So in terms of the first question we got, Bill, this was for you. So do you know if this tax benefit was added to the TurboTax 2020 program?
I don't know. It's interesting someone asks that, because there are different of these like online services and I historically always did my own taxes. Just the past few years, I've used TurboTax of all the ones that are available, and I thought it was great. I have not looked yet, but I will almost guarantee that any decent service such as TurboTax, they will update it and it will be there. I would say if anybody, this applies to anybody, however they're having their taxes done, has any questions, if they have TurboTax and they don't find it, I go back to what I said before. Any questions, email me. If your question is, I'm trying to do my taxes on TurboTax and I don't see what you talked about, email me that and I'll take a look, or we'll figure it out. So short answer, I don't have the answer right now, but don't worry, we can chat when the time comes and I'll make sure you get looked after.
Thank you, Bill. And I see a question also just about these slides. So This entire presentation will be available at www.mycesar.ca/legal. So folks can always go back and look at any of the workshops that we've done around legal aid and find them there. And we'll see if we can also post the slides, but obviously you can access them with the context of the video through our website. I see a question here about how would the detailed form impact property taxes?
As I recall, and like I said, the CRA very clearly sets out what expenses are deductible and which ones are not. So anyone would have to have reference to the CRA website. It's not difficult to find. Again, if anybody doesn't readily find it, email me and I'll look it up and I'll send you the link. Just off the top of my head, as I recall, pardon me, property taxes are not deductible unless you are a commission employee. If you are, and because there are certain expenses that are not claimable by an employee who's paid hourly or by salary, but are by an employee who is paid by commission. I didn't get into that, but the categories are all made very clear, and anybody in their own situation, however they're paid, it's not difficult to find. I come back to what I believe off the top of my head is that property tax is something that's only claimable if you are a commissioned employee. But you know what? I come back to when you do your own taxes in your own situation, whether you use somebody or an online service or whatever, have any questions, email me, and we can chat about it then, and I'll make sure that we get to the bottom of it.
Thank you, Bill. So the next question we had was, how much would have to be claimed under the old system to receive the $400 we are eligible to get in the flat rate simplified version? Is the deduction the full amount you are claiming? Example, a percentage of your utility bill.
So in the detailed system, like I said, you have your list of claimable expenses, which may be different, like I say, whether you're commission or hourly or whatever, pardon me. But in your own situation, you have a list of expenses you can claim. The essence of the question is very good, which is there even an advantage to doing the detailed system? If you have a relatively small home and a fairly significant proportion of it is your home office, and if then in that situation, you may do the math of what percentage your home office is of the entire home and your eligible expenses. You may find that you do the math and it comes out to more than 400. If you have a large home and a small home office, or even a large home and any kind of home office, you may find that the home office is such a small percentage of the home that the amount you end up being able to calculate is pretty small, and in many cases less than 400. So it just does depend on the math, but it is, for many people, the 400 is going to be as good as they can do. And in most cases, there won't be an advantage. I think the biggest case where there may be an advantage is if, like I say, their home is small and the home office takes up most of it, which some single people living downtown may be their case. But I can assist anybody with the math. I mean, I don't hold myself out to be a tax person. We have the other resources, but as Corey said, I also have an MBA in finance. I've done my own complicated tax for years, so I would know what assistance I could give anyone who does have questions. And the simple math, certainly, I had that discussion with some people in the office when we first began to have this conversation, and then they said, "Oh yeah, now I understand how this works." So the big difference, as I said, is some people, if they have expenses other than home office, such as a vehicle, tools, parking, those things you have to go through the detailed method for anyway. So it comes back to what I always say about everything. Every situation is unique. see if you can make things work. If you have questions, be in touch with me.
Thank you, Bill. And I think this kind of jumps into it if you didn't already address it, but if there is more than one person living in the home, does this affect the flat rate? And should people with other people living in the home be splitting the utilities costs when using the simplified version?
The simplified procedure, multiple people in the same residence may make the same claim. It's that simple. If you're using the detailed, well then, yes, it gets into how much of the home area is one person's workspace, how much is the next, and they have to do those calculations of percentages to calculate their own individual share of those claimable expenses. But the simplified method, no, multiple people in the same home can make the claim.
Thank you. So I'm seeing questions in the chat now. Feel free to use the Q&A feature, but so people who get reimbursed by the employer have to fill out the 2200 in order to claim the additional expense. And what expenses can they claim? Example, space used, etc.
Well, as I said, that's on the CRA website. If anybody kind of Google searches, they'll find that. If they have any questions, email me. We can talk about your own individual situation.
And now we are jumping into some questions for Alyssa. So can we use UFile for spouse and partners as well, or is this free filing just available for students only?
So your family situation as a student will be included in your tax filing. So in the in-person clinic, if a student comes in and they have a spouse, common law partner, you know, they would have to come in with that individual's information, and that would be included in the appointment. So the answer is definitely yes. You can use the free UFile software if your partner is included in your household. You know, it's just you would have like an extra profile or an extra sort of interview, but it would all be done as one. Like at the end, there's only one result, right? So I hope that answers the question. If you aren't in the same sort of household, you know, and you're wondering about your partner not being a student, I think, as I mentioned earlier, if you have the code, there's actually no way to sort of identify like if you're a student or not. So, you know, you can use the code. I'm just going to say that. But we do provide it for students, and it is a service that's brought about because students have sort of pooled resources across the country. So it's a great service. I do encourage that you use it, and UFile is like a pretty well-known software. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Alyssa. So we have two more questions that I see. So the $2 a day count, does that include weekends or is it just work days?
It includes weekends if your weekend is a work day. If you have a job where you work from home, and I'm not talking about days when your employer is closed or normally closed or actually closed, and you happen to choose to do some work, almost like homework. No, that would not count. If your employer is open and you are working from home the same way you'd be working at the employer's otherwise because they're open, then that day counts, even if that's a Saturday or a Sunday. It's kind of like what days your employer designates as a work day.
Great. I think that's a great question and a great answer, Bill. And then I see, I think, a bit more of a complicated question. So Bill, feel free to check out the Q&A just to make sure that my reading of it is correct. But sorry, my understanding was that your income tax deduction for home office may not be worth it if they reassess a large percentage of your home as commercial property tax versus residential. Is that not accurate?
If a large amount of your home is commercial, well, I'm not exactly sure what they mean by that. I mean, what the CRA talks about is your living space. Like, to me, the residential portion of the property, whatever other commercial portion there may be, it's a matter of you using a percentage of the residential portion that you would normally live in. The CRA bases the calculation only on the residential portion, like your home, regardless of what else may be taking place in the same building. Are we on the same page here?
I think that makes sense, and maybe I think because this one might be a bit more specific, this would be a great example of maybe reaching out to Bill via legal at mycesar.ca to certainly do a follow up, and if a referral is necessary, then that might be. But yeah, like this is these are the great questions that we have to figure out, because it is a different world we're living in than in February 2020 last year, right? So thank you for that. I don't see any other questions in the chat. And thank you everyone for asking the questions. I know that in the Zoom world, we're sometimes harder to ask questions, and it's great to see that participation happening here. Bill and Alyssa, I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add on before we close up the session.
Not me.
Maybe just for folks to know that you can file multi-year tax returns with some of the free CRA clinics. So if you're not very confident to do it on your own using the code that we provided you through with ufile.ca, definitely reach out for help. You know, the CRA is the best sort of resource. The website, you can also call them. So I just wanted to say that, because in person, sometimes we get questions from folks that haven't done, you know, previous year's returns. So, you know, you can definitely get help for that. And there are clinics that the volunteer will have a longer appointment with you to do that.
And just one thing I think to also add for any international students who might be joining us, if you are looking at filing your taxes, usually Ryerson International Student Services will also do clinics. We're just waiting to get that information. So folks can certainly inquire there if you are an international student looking at what the tax system looks like for you, that there is that level of expertise and complication usually available through Ryerson. That will probably send out an email once we get that. Great. So thank you, Bill and Alyssa, for coming in today. I'm just going to let folks know about some of our upcoming workshops. So this week I should know what the date is, but on the week of January 21st to 29th, CESAR is hosting Frost Week. So there's a number of social and networking events that are happening in the evenings. But we do also have some workshops laid out for the remainder of the semester. So on Thursday, we will have a workshop on what's happening with the National Student Loan Center, because there's a lot of stuff happening federally with a portion of federal loans. So if you want to find out what's happening with that and some of the misinformation that's gone out, but also what kind of actions we can take as students around the federal component of student loans, feel free to join us this Thursday from 12 to 1 on a format very similar to this. So you can RSVP on our website or join us on Facebook Live. We also have some legal aid workshops with Bill set up for February and March. So you can join us for a session on tenants' rights and rent evictions and everything that involves the landlord and tenant board on Wednesday, February 24th, 12 to 1. And then in March, we have on Tuesday, March 23rd, 12 to 1 as well, a discussion around student debt and some of the common things that Bill can help you out with in terms of compiling documents and notarizing documents and anything that might come with that, which Bill spends certainly a lot of time helping students with those things. So join us for that to get some information. We also do have some financial aid workshops. So on Thursday, March 11th, we'll be having a session around budgeting during COVID-19 and some student-friendly ways in terms of talking about budget that doesn't involve critiquing us for buying too many coffees or spending our money inappropriately. So join us for that for a very friendly version of student budgeting. And we'll also have a session in April around RRSPs and TFSAs. It won't be coming from someone trying to sell you or convince you to do RRSPs or TFSAs. It will be around what are the benefits of it? How can you get there, especially if you are already incurring student debt like most of us, but what some of the importances are and some of the benefits of thinking about those in advance, even if you can't make the contributions right away. So you can find out all of the CESAR events at mycesar.ca/events. Check out our e-newsletters, find us on D2L, follow us on social media, specifically subscribe to our YouTube page because we are uploading everything to YouTube with closed captioning, and really have a great semester. Stay involved, stay safe, practice some good self and community care, and have a great week. Thanks. Bye, everyone.